on the mimer over here. We left off yesterday at Ois Gimel, and we were talking about the Meraglim. What exactly were they thinking? What was going on in their minds? And we said that they believed that it's impossible for them to elevate the sparks of Tohu. They believed that the sparks of the world of Tohu, since Tohu is such a powerful world and so high, that it's impossible for them to be able to draw down into this world those very lofty sparks and not be either overwhelmed by them, not to be overtaken by them. And since they didn't know that Tikkun would have the power, the vessels of Tikkun would have the power to be able to elevate and deal with Toyu. And that's what it means that they said, Ki chazaku mimenu, that it is stronger than him. What's it mean, the word it is stronger than him? It is stronger than him means that it is stronger. The world of Toyu, which is manifested in the physical things with which a person does physical mitzvahs in this world, is greater than the power of the world of Tikkun to be able to incorporate it, to be able to deal with it, because as we know, the lights of Tikkun, the odors of Tikkun are much weaker than Toyu. So now we're going to explain what was the answer, what was the response to them. We know that Kalev responded to the Meraglim, and Kalev said, no, it's not true. So the question is, where do we see in Kalev's response that spiritual component as well? Because again, you read the Torah on many levels. So we read the Torah in the way of Pshat. So we see the conversation that was going on. In the way of Pshat, we're saying the Meraglim were saying that, sorry, can't deal with the physical stuff here in this world, can't handle it. Meaning, just literally, we can't conquer the nations. The Eibishter can't chas v'shalom do it either. But on the spiritual level, we as well were saying things that the Tikkun would not be able to overcome the powerful odors of Toyu. So just like we understand in the physical sense, what Yeshua and Kalev was responding to the Meraglim and told them, yes, we'll be able to do it. We are able and we are capable, and the Eibishter is with us, and so on. So we need to also understand in the spiritual sense what exactly was Kalev's response to the Meraglim. So that's what we're going to learn right now. Page Ches, line 12, Ois Gim. Chalzen Nemar, concerning this problem, that the Meraglim were saying that the Makifim of the world of Toyu, great powerful lights, the transcendent lights of the world of Toyu, are too powerful. And we made reference to this before, that it says in Kabbalah, it's brought down this a great length of Chassidus, that in Toyu, it was Oiros Merubim, the Kalim Mu'atim. They were very great, meaning powerful revelations and godly light. And the vessels to contain them were few, were too small, and that created the breaking of the vessels. In Tikkun, it's Oiros Mu'atim. It's few and lesser lights and revelation. And the Kalim are Merubim, the vessels are many. So the being that the lights in Tikkun is few, how can the few and lesser and weaker and constricted lights of Tikkun, limited lights of Tikkun, how can they deal with and overcome the great and powerful and strong lights of Toyu to such a degree that we liken them to kings? They're called over there in Klippa, it's called Eser Kisfin, them Savusa, there's 10 crowns of Tumah, because they descend from the crowns and the kingdoms of the world of Toyu. And also, we have this term that's used in Kabbalah. There's the 7 Malchim Kadmoim, the 7 early kings of Toyu, which is a reference to what it enumerates in the end of Parshas Vayishlach, where it contrasts the children of Yaakov and the offspring of Yaakov versus the offspring of Esau, that speaks of there that in Edom, Esau's offspring, there were 7 kings. So the Kabbalah is going on the 7 midas of Tayu that broke, because it says over there, by Yamas, by Yimlech, they died and they reigned, they died and they reigned, etc. Because they couldn't reign together, they couldn't join together as kings. They were too powerful and they caused the breaking of the vessels. But being that they're too powerful, the Meraglim are saying there's no way that we who come from Tikkun can handle it. So by going into Eretz Yisrael and dealing with the sparks of godliness in the physical, material world in which the mitzvahs are enclosed, we cannot handle it. It will overtake us. It will overwhelm us, because the itis of Tikkun are too weak to overcome and deal with the itis of Tayyip. For this, concerning this, it says that Kalev shushed by Yas. He said to the Lord Has. He silenced them. He quieted them to Moshe. So and he said, Oloi Nalam, we will surely go up, we will go up, via Rash Noisa, and we will take it over, we will get the land, Ki Yochel Nuchala, because we are surely able to take it. We have the capabilities, we have the power, we have the might, we have the strength to be able to conquer Eretz Yisrael. I knew. So first, the Rebbe is going to explain the general theme that Kalev was saying in continuation of what we said before, and then he's going to go into the specifics, how specifically every part of what Kalev was saying answered and had a bearing on the issue at hand. It says in general, line 14, Hainum, he was saying that we are able to refine the sparks that tell you. That's the first thing that Kalev was telling the rest of the people and the Meraglim. And how did he express it? So he expressed it by different things that he said here in the Pasuk. Hagdim, to preface, to understand how Kalev was telling them that we will be able to deal with the sparks of Tayu. So by first prefacing the different things that we need to analyze and see the exact language in this puzzle. What does he say? Vayas Kalev that Kalev made the nation silent. El Moshe, to Moshe. Seemingly, he should have just said that Kalev's silence quieted the nation. What does it mean that Kalev silenced them to Moshe? It wasn't even a matter that Moshe was now addressing them. It was Kalev that was addressing them. They should have said that Kalev silenced them and told them, yes, we'll be able to go up, we'll be able to overtake them. What's the concept by Yas Kalev El Moshe? That Kalev silenced the people to Moshe. Even the expression is also a little bit strange. And even Rashi and Chumash deals with it, and the Mefarsha and Mikra also find the expression strange. So he says, and another question we have in the pasuk, the Gamtzar Lahavn, also we need to understand, what does he say? That we will surely be able to deal with it, and we'll be able to overcome it. He already said that we will surely go up and be able to take the land. Why did he have to add to that? We will Yachol Nuchel. It just seems to be a repetition of saying Olei Nala. Once you're saying Olei Nala v'Yirash Noisa, we already said, yes, it's within our capability. Yes, we're able to do this. So what's the idea that he says that Vanucha, that we are able to do this? It says in line 21, the idea behind this is what's the reason? And the midas of Tayyip, it was the breaking of the vessels to such a degree. There's room for the complaint of the Meraglim that follow this. It said that the owner cannot remove his vessels. In other words, the not being able to remove the vessels is to say that the worlds of Tayu are too powerful to be able to handle to be able to be handled by tikkun. So this is the idea behind the entire breaking of the vessels. The reason for this is Midas the Midas of Tayu was in a state of ego. Now it's very important to know we're talking about a spiritual world and we're talking about a godly world. We're not talking about klippa. So since the world of Tayu before the breaking of the vessels was not klippa, so therefore we must say that Yeshus is not in the literal sense as Yeshus is here in klippa, total and complete ego the way it's in klippa, but rather Yeshus takes on over here a different form. What is this other form of Yeshus? What is this other idea of Yeshus that he's speaking about over here? So he says, "Chu inyan hispilus hamidus ba'ofen shel hisrakshus v'hislavus v'rashkul." It's an idea of an excitement of the emotions in such a way that it's passionate and a tumult and a very flame-fired, very expansive type of way. In other words, what the Rebbe is explaining here is we're talking about holy midas. We're talking about love of Hashem, chesed of Tayu. We're talking about awe of Hashem in the gvura of Tayu. And we're talking about beautifying Hashem and tiferes to Tayu, etc., etc. But they were so overcome with these emotions. They were so powerful. They were so great that their self-absorption in that action of that particular midah, whether chesed, whether gevura, whether tiferes, was so powerful that it just came at loggerheads with the other midas. Like we know, the example is given about Talmid Rabbi Akiva, that the students of Rabbi Akiva, each one believed that, like the Rebbe explains, that their derech and avodas Hashem, their way in the service of Hashem, was the way, and that was what the Rebbe taught them. And therefore, they couldn't work together, and they couldn't, at least, they couldn't have respect. They couldn't have respect the way Talmid Rabbi Akiva had to have for another. In a similar vein, when a person, even down here, when a person is so fully overwhelmed with the emotion of love, when it's in a full-blown, excited manner, it doesn't leave any room for another emotion of awe, etc., etc. When it's full of emotion of awe and fear, it doesn't leave a room for a different emotion. So therefore, this type of ego, but an ego of Kedusha, Yeshus in Kedusha, caused the breaking of the vessels, and therefore, the sparks fell into the world of Toyu and so on. So line 28, he goes on to explain how that fits in with the wording of what the Meraglim were saying. It says, that the nation is only, this is the only thing that they are. They're very powerful, they're very strong, they're very mighty. The Meraglim were referring to the godly sparks embedded in Eretz Yisrael, with which they didn't want to deal with in refining. And they said that it is the powerful midas of Tayu that cannot be conquered, like we said at the end of the previous paragraph. He says, therefore, the advice to refine them is to effect a weakening of the emotions. So that is the point that we need to, how do we refine them? We refine them through affecting a weakening of the emotions. What does it mean, a weakening of the emotions? Instead of the emotion should be in a state of yeshus and ego, instead the emotion should be in a state of bittul. He loves Hashem, but his love of Hashem does not, the expression goes, take up all the space in the room. It leaves room for someone else as well. The Zel Vayas, that's the top of the next page. That's what Kalev said. Or that's the pasuk said that Kalev affected Vayas. He silenced them. Lashon shtika, from the word silence. What does silence mean? It's known that the idea of silence, the idea of sublimation and bittul. Paul that that Kalev affected the weakening and the bittul of the midas. So Vayas Kolev is not just about silencing the meraglim. It was about silencing and quieting and lessening these lights of Toyu the way they are embedded in Eretz Yisrael, so that the meraglim don't have to be fearful of it. Hine, line 3, Inyan Habitul Nasai Dam Shach Samoich. What is the tool? What silences? What quiets down the midas? What's the means through that we have at our disposal to quiet down the midas? He says that's through drawing down intellect. We know the idea of moyach shalat al-lev, that the head rules over the heart, and with that it quiets down the midas and controls the midas and directs the midas. As we see by someone who is a very brain-focused person, a very intellectual person. So, usually, you don't see such excitement by them with their emotions. Usually, by a person like that, the emotions are much of a lesser degree. The emotional people are usually people that they're not that intellectually oriented. The more a person is intellectually oriented, the more emotions come out and so on. So he says, flawless because the general nature of intellect is in a way of calmness and being settled. That's the difference between intellect and emotions. Intellect is a calm thing, and not only is it itself calm, but it's calming when you bring intellect into any type of situation. And emotions, on the other hand, isn't a matter of excitability and passion and going over the top. Like it says, Sava, the old one, meaning in Zakin, in Chazal, and so on, is not talking about old in years, even though that's assumed as well. But it's talking about someone that is a man of intellect. Zakin Zemishakana Chachma, someone that acquired wisdom. That toy saw some, his mind is closed, meaning that it's like something that is a very deep intellect. So it says the chamar tov, like good wine, the shokit v'shokich, that is tranquil and quiet upon its sediment. In other words, during fermentation, when the wine is still new, so it's like fermentation. Literally, the wine is moving, it's bubbling, it's so on. And then old wine, it's like it says, it's calm. It's sitting on top of the sediments that came to the bottom of the bottle or the barrel, etc., etc. The same thing. The wise person, he is shokit b'shokit. He is in a way that's quieted down. There isn't all that tumult. There isn't all that hispilus. There isn't all that excitement. I'm sorry. Cause of this nature. That midas, by its very nature, emotions by its very nature, is something that is excitable and is passionate and is with a great tumult, as opposed to the intellect is something that is quieter. That's the reason why the breaking of the vessels wasn't the emotions, because over there it's so passionate and so exciting and they clash and so on. Intellect is by its very nature quiet. So as powerful as the intellect is, you're not going to find that type of passionate type of break, knocking each other's heads together and so on. Rather, there's brought down the Chassidus that it was a stalkus of the Moich. Anyway, it says, this is what it says in the Pasuk, El Moshe, we asked, why does it say that he silenced him, that Kalev silenced them to Moshe? What was this idea of silencing them to Moshe? Because it's the fact of nullifying the emotions, the idea Moshe through joining the emotions to Moshe, the level of Moshe Rabbeinu we know is the level of Shema, the level of Chachma. Chachma is Koyachma. Yes, by Hakoyach Lifal Habito Midas to tell you, when Moshe Rabbeinu is brought into the picture, he has the capability to affect a bittul in the midst of Tayu. Indians, the Hutzar Chliyas, like they call it, and this had to take place through Kalev, because the best way to nullify the words of the Meraglim is through they themselves. In other words, the Rebbe is adding now another point. To deal with Klippa, to deal with things that are a negative and so on, you need to derive it from they themselves. It says, Al derech marzal, similar to what the Chazal say, Meneu be Abel Shadi be Nargim, that from the forest itself, you take the wood that makes the handle of the axe with which one chops down the trees of the forest. So the same way, to be able to counter the Meraglim, you couldn't have Moshe just come as he is to be able to affect the bittul in the midas of Tayu, but you have to have Kolev bring Moshe into the equation, bring the bittul of Moshe upon the Meraglim. It says, V'gam, another reason why it was Kolev's job, not Moshe's direct job to do, the future Kolev, Rebbe is going to say over here that Kolev's level was an intermediate level between Moshe and the rest of the nation. Kolev, B'gematria Eliyahu, B'gematria Ban. Kolev is the numerical equivalent of the word Eliyahu, in other words, Eliyahu Navi, and also it's the gematria of 52, which is also the gematria of Eliyahu, which is also the gematria of Kolev. In other words, there's Shem Ma, as we know, and there's Shem Ban. Shem Ban has to do with the world. Shem Ma is higher than the world, the level of Koyach Ma. So, and in Shem Ban itself, there's pure Shem Ban and Shem Ban, which is part of Ma, which acts as an intermediary. We know that Eliyahu Navi was not the regular level of Ban having to do with the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah, but it was Ban of Shema, was the level of Malchus of Atzilus, and so on. Therefore, Kalik, who was this level of Ban of Ma, was able to join the nation to Moshe, to draw down into the nation the level of Bit. Let's see if we can finish the Maimer. We'll leave the questions for the end. And through this process of bringing the bittul of Moshe down to the nation, and therefore affecting in them the bittul that's necessary to be able to quiet the midas of Tayu, in the so we will go up and we'll be able to take the land because we will be able to conquer it. The idea behind this is what it says that we will inherit it. It's called on the inheriting of the lights of Tayu. It says when Mashiach comes that we will inherit the mountain of Seir, the level of Edom, which represents Tayu. So that's the idea, and we're starting that process by going into Eretz Yisrael. And she said, how does one inherit Tayu? It needs to be, Chassidus always speaks about that to refine the emotions, one needs to deal with everything in a specific manner. It's brought down in Sforim of that Chassidus that talk about davening, ba'avodah, and so on. That's not just enough that when a person meditates during davening, they think about the greatness of the Eibishter, and they think about how I need to be a better person, but we need to focus on every midah individually. It doesn't have to be by the same davening. But I need to focus on something I need to change and transform. Because I believe in the Eibishter, because I want to lessen my ego, I'll work on my gaiva, I'll work on my kas, or whatever. There needs to be a focus on specifics. And that's how we can conquer the midas. By just making a general resolution, I'm going to be better, that's not going to change oneself. And this specific refinement comes after prefacing a general type of weakness. First of all, we need a weakened klippa in general, weakened tayu in general, and then we could deal with the individual type of midah. So, that's the idea that we are able to overcome it. The idea we're able to overcome it, that is the general idea. Generally having the bittul to be able to deal with the tayu, and then you have the next step, the effect of the general weakness is only the beginning of the avoid. Just like when a person approaches davening and so on, there has to be the general idea, the general feeling that a person has to be like a servant before his master. And like the words of Kalev, if Hashem desires us, do not rebel against Hashem. So first you have to have the basic Kabbalah soil. That's a general type of devotion to Hashem. That's the first thing. That's do not rebel. Kabbalah soil. And that is an introduction that must come before one refines and deals with every single detail of every midah to be able to refine each individual midah. So the goal of the avodah is to refine every midah specifically and individually. Just like when we say, but the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, that was the paradigm for all types of avodas Hashem. So initially it says, draw me. That drawing me that it says over there when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim is the general type of Yisairis that Hashem inspired us to want to become close to. But following that, that's not enough. Now we have to have the avodah of the 49 days, Sfiras HaOmer, that Shbehem Mevarim Kol Proti Zayin Amidus, that then we have to refine all the 49 midas, the way they are 7 times 7, meaning we're breaking it down to all the details. So there's the general and then the details, just like we said over here. The idea behind this is that the general weakness becomes through the level of bitush, through the breaking apart of the coarseness of the clipping. Before Betanya, like explained in Tanya, at the end of Perek Chavtes, when Moshe told them and described how Hashem became angry against them, when they heard these very harsh words, they became subservient and their heart broke within them. Meaning, the Alter Rebbe over there in Tanya asks a question: how all of a sudden, after Moshe Rabbeinu took them to task about their whole rebellion against the Eibishter, all of a sudden they said, "Oh, we will go up and conquer it." What changed? How did Moshe Rabbeinu all of a sudden change their attitude that now they wanted to go into Eretz Yisrael and before they weren't ready for it? The Rebbe explains the difference was just because Moshe Rabbeinu screamed at them. Moshe Rabbeinu broke them. Moshe Rabbeinu said, "How can you do this?" and etc., etc. He didn't convince them logically. He broke down his expressions, the coarseness of Klippim, and therefore now they were able to feel some type of general type of weakening of the Klippim and bittul to the Eibishter. But that's insufficient, like we said before. That's only the beginning. That's only the general outline, the preface to the entire avodah. This is all in a way that it's makif, that it's transcendent still. So it should be in a way that it is internalized within the person. There needs to be an individual meditation dealing with the individual midas and so on, in such a way that every specific detail and intellect deals with a specific the idea of a midah. In other words, there's certain levels of the mind that has to do with the level of midah of chesed, certain things have to do with the midah of gvura, and each one is brought to bear to elevate that particular midah. Until one refines step by step, little by little, all the details of the midas. The rest of the mimer, it says in the footnote, is missing, so therefore we don't really have it. Any questions?